Once upon a time, a girl named Ella lived happily with her parents. Her world was warm, gentle, and filled with laughter. But happiness did not last forever for Ella. Her mother died of illness, and both were devastated. Life was miserable for them. Soon the father decided to take responsibility and marry another woman so Ella could have a mother figure in her life. The woman was Lady Tremaine, whose husband had also died fighting in the war. She also had 2 daughters, Anastasia and Drusilla. The father also grew fond of them, and they lived happily for many years. Until her father died. Soon after, she was turned into a maid for the 3 of them. They even changed her name after seeing her covered in cinders near the fireplace. Her new name became Cinderella. They mocked her and made fun of her while demanding to do all the chores in the home. But Cinderella remembered her mother's last words was to always be kind, so she followed that. She did all the work in the home, cleaning, cooking, stitching clothes. She had a few animal friends that kept her company through all her hard times. She loved spending time with them. One day, there was an announcement made by the royal family that all the maidens in the kingdom were invited to the ball held in the royal palace. And it was stated that any girl would have a chance to become the prince's bride. The mailman arrived at Ella's home and he called for Lady Tremaine. Since she was busy upstairs, Ella opened the door and took the letter from him. He said that all maidens were invited to the prince's ball. Any maiden could attend the ball at the royal palace. Cinderella thanked the mailman and shut the door. She was also curious about balls since she never attended one. That too at the royal palace. Then all 3 of them came down and saw Ella opening the letter and saw that it had the royal seal, so they took it from her and read it aloud. As they began reading the letter, their excitement grew. Just meant that they could have a chance of meeting and marrying noble people, especially the Rickney. Lady Tremaine was the most happy because she wanted her daughters to marry into nobility. Ella remembered what the mailman said and asked her stepmother if she could come too, stating that all maidens were allowed to attend the ball, so there would be no restriction on her going to the ball. Lady Tremaine didn't want her to come to the ball. Kesh had always been jealous of Ella. So she made a plan and told Ella she could come to the ball if she did all the work, such as preparing the 3 ladies for the ball, house chores, and arranging transport, etc. Lady Tremaine also told her she should have a suitable dress for the ball too. Ella happily agreed and did what she was told. She finished her daily chores, prepared the dresses for their stepsisters and stepmother, and spent time on stitching a pink dress with the help of her animal friends. Her animal friends took some of the charms and ribbons from the stepsisters' room, which was discarded, so that Ella's dress would look wonderful. Her stepsisters would also give her extra chores such as shining their shoes and fixing their dresses to make them look more attractive. Lady Tremaine also have a handful of tasks for her. Soon the days passed and JT was the day of the royal ball. Ella woke up early and finished all her chores. Then she went to help them get ready for the ball. By the time everything was over, it was already evening and it was almost time to leave for the ball. Then suddenly Ella said, "Wait for me. I would also like to come to the ball with you too." When they saw Ella, all 3 became jealous. Even if she was wearing a simple dress, she looked magnificent. The stepsisters saw their ribbons and pearls and other charms on her dress, then claimed that she stole them and started to rip her dress, taking back all of the things which they never even wanted. Cinderella kept pleading them to stop, but they only stopped until her dress was in pieces. Then Lady Tremaine smirked and said it was getting late for the ball and the carriage was about to leave. So they all left, leaving poor Ella on the staircase. She walked to the garden and kept crying and crying until she heard a sound. She turned around to see a bright shining light where a beautiful fairy came out from. The beautiful fairy introduced herself as her fairy godmother. She told her she had been looking over Ella for many years since her mother's death and noticed her kindness in hard situation, so she decided to come help her to the ball. Ella asked how that was possible because she did not have a dress or a carriage. Then the fairy godmother told her not to worry and told her to bring the largest pumpkin in her garden, a few mice and 2 horses. Ella did as she was told and brought them to the fairy. With a flick of her wand, she said bib bip bobbity boo and turned the pumpkin into a beautiful carriage, the mice into horses and the 2 horses into 2 handsome footmen. Then she turned her ripped dress into a big beautiful blue shimmering ball gown. Her hair was tied in a beautiful hairstyle too. Ella was surprised, and she twirled in the dress and thanked her fairy godmother. As she was about to leave, the fairy godmother noticed her slippers were worn and torn. She asked her if she didn't have another pair. Ella told her those were the only pair she had and no one would even notice it because of the big dress. The fairy godmother disapproved of her idea, and with a flick of her wand decided to make a beautiful pair of glass slippers which matched her dress perfectly. She handed Ella the glass slippers. Ella put them on and told her it was a perfect fit too and thanked her once more. Before leaving, the fairy godmother told her that she should come home before midnight because at midnight the effects of her magic would wear off and everything turn back to normal and her identity would be revealed. She also told her to enjoy her time at the ball too. Ella promised to come back before midnight and bid her fairy godmother a farewell, and the carriage left. By the time Ella arrived at the royal palace, the ball had already begun. When Ella entered the ball, everyone was astonished. Not because she was ugly, it was because she was the most beautiful woman in the room. People thought she was a princess from a faraway land or belonged to royalty. Meanwhile, the prince was extremely bored at the ball. All noble ladies talked about the same thing and it made him frustrated. Then he saw Ella, the mysterious girl at the ball. He was astonished by her beauty and decided to ask her for a dance. Ella accepted and they both danced while gaining the attention of everyone at the ball. Everyone said that the girl was a perfect match for the prince. Even her stepmother and stepsisters who were at the ball saw her and they thought the same. They couldn't even recognize that was the same Ella that had been living with them. Nonetheless, they were still jealous of her because she became the spotlight of the ball and stole the heart of the prince, but Lady Tremaine was focused on getting her daughters to meet and marry into nobility or high ranks. As Ella and the prince talked and talked, they realized that they had more things in common too. The prince liked her personality. She was funny, smart, and adventurous compared to the other noble ladies. They decided to escape from the ball for a bit and spend time with each other. The prince wanted to get to know her better too. So he took her to his secret garden he would always go to. Ella was also amazed by the beauty of the palace and the garden too. She and the prince shared stories, jokes, shared the names of the books they have read, talked about the garden and some childhood moments. Ella had forgotten about the promise she made to her fairy godmother as time passed. Soon it was almost midnight and Ella didn't realize until the clock tower outside the palace began to strike. When she heard the clock striking, Ella remembered the promise and began to conclude her conversation with the prince in an urgent way and began to leave. But the prince was confused on why she was leaving so soon and began walking behind her, asking her to come back and at least tell her name to him. As the clock kept striking, Ella began to go faster and faster. She kept apologizing to the prince as she ran, but the prince kept yelling and running wait as she ran. She kept running and reached the main steps, and suddenly one of the glass slippers slipped off and landed on the steps of the castle. She went back to get it, but saw the prince getting closer and closer. She decided to run and ran with one slipper till she reached her carriage. She hopped in the carriage and told the footman to drive as fast as they can. The prince, who was running, found the glass slipper and realized it was hers. When he saw her go inside the carriage, he hopped on his horse and took his men with him to chase after her. But the carriage was fast and they were able to lose the prince. Demotivated, the prince returned to the palace with the glass slipper. And Ella returned home. By the time she reached home, everything returned to its original form, except the glass slippers, which were crafted from the fairy's magic. Ella reminisced of her time at the ball while looking at the slipper as if it was a dream. She started her chores too to make sure her stepsister and stepmother wouldn't find out she went to the ball. They came back and teased Ella that she wasn't able to attend the ball at all, but Ella acted how she always would so they wouldn't doubt her. Ella made sure to hide the glass slipper in her room too, so that her stepmother wouldn't find out. The next day, there was a royal announcement made by the prince that he was looking for the girl who would fit the glass slipper, and that girl would be his bride. The entire kingdom erupted, and all women became ready trying to see if the slipper fits. The prince went to each home by the kingdom and tried the slipper on each of them, but their feet were either too big or too small. By the time they reached Ella's home, which was the farthest home in the kingdom, they were demotivated. When Lady Tremaine received news that the prince came to her home, she locked Ella in her room because she didn't want her to have a chance of even trying it on, if it would mean reducing her daughter's chances of marrying the prince. Ella also knew the prince was visiting, but she couldn't go downstairs because she was locked in her attic room. Meanwhile, Lady Tremaine introduced the prince to her daughters, and the prince asked them to try it on. They began fighting over the slipper and who it fit better. The prince asked Lady Tremaine if there were any other young women in her home. Lady Tremaine said no, and told her she had only 2 daughters, no one else. Meanwhile, the mice felt sorry for Ella and stole the key and opened the door to her room. Ella ran down the stairs just before the prince was about to leave. The prince saw her, even Lady Tremaine. She was surprised she was able to escape. The prince asked who she was, and Lady Tremaine tried to distract the prince, but he insisted Ella should try the slipper. But when he was about to give it to her, Lady Tremaine dropped the slipper on purpose, and she passed it on as an accident. But suddenly Ella showed the prince the glass slipper she had, and the prince asked her to try it on. The prince put it on, and it was a perfect fit. The prince looked at her and held her hand while looking at her lovingly. Ella looked at him in the same way, and they rejoiced. Prince took her back to the castle, and they got married in a year. They invited the entire kingdom, even Ella's step-family. The sisters were still jealous of Ella. Their living situation became worse after Ella left too. They AHD to do everything themselves now. This made Ella and the prince the new king and queen of the kingdom. They both were the best rulers the kingdom ever had. The people loved both of them dearly. This is the happily ever after of Ella.